come to spend 2 hours with us in the great town of Newport, and then travel to Roanoke this afternoon to speak to folks on that side of those affected by the pipeline. I also want to thank my colleague who's joining me here today, Delegate Greg Habib, who represents the 8th District. Our offices worked together to get this set up for everybody. I want to give just a few quick ground rules. Director Paylor, once I am done speaking, is going to open it up and speak for about 15 minutes to provide some information about the department's guidelines and certification process that they go through regarding the pipelines in Virginia. Once he is done speaking, we will open it up to those who are signed up to speak. If you want to sign up to speak, you can do so at the door at the back of the auditorium here. We will go in numerical order. There will not be a time limit for those speaking, unlike at the public hearings where you had 3 minutes. However, I would encourage you to please keep your remarks within 4 to 5 minutes so everybody can get a chance to speak. There will also be opportunities for questions with the director, so if you have questions, please have them prepared. If you would like to have something submitted as part of the official record for this process, you can turn it into the table at the back, and we will communicate that to DEQ so they can have that. And with that, I will turn it over to the director, and he will speak, and once he's done, I'll come back up, and we will get started with questions and testimony. So thank you, sir.
At least, clear up some confusion and have a good dialogue here this afternoon. And if for some reason I get too far away from the mic, just raise your hands or whatever. Thanks. I guess I'll start by saying that, I am fully aware of what a huge project this proposal is, and I understand why there is as much concern as there is. I want to say that at DEQ, our guidelines are to be guided by the law and to be guided by the science. And in that context, whatever opinion I have doesn't matter because our determinations and decisions need to be guided by the law and the science. And so, for example, when I say guided by the law, we have authorities over some things and we don't have authorities over other things. And we don't have authority over eminent domain. The state law specifically prevents us from having anything to do with pipeline routing. We don't have anything to do with the forest impacts. There are other agencies that have to do with all of that. So we have limits on what's our jurisdiction and what isn't our jurisdiction. And when I talk about the science, within the context of realities are. We have not made any decisions on what we're going to recommend. One of the things that I heard in terms of concern is how can you public notice a preliminary determination. That's the way all of our programs work, is that we take initial draft permits, draft certificates based on our understanding of the law and the science, and then that's what the purpose of public comment is, and it's not infrequent for public comment that we receive to result in changes, modifications to what we may or may not recommend. So it is absolutely the fact that we will be viewing all of the comments that we get under the law and the science headings, and trying to determine if we've got it right or not. So the comments that you make are particularly important. Has been made. At some point this fall, we will likely have made a recommendation to the State Water Control Board. It's a 7-member board, and that information will be and whatever our recommendation is will be presented to them. They will have an opportunity to hear from the public again at that meeting on the adequacy of our summary of comments and our response to comments. So no decision has been made, and no final decision has been made, and the board could opt to accept staff recommendation. They could modify staff recommendation. They could deny the permit. So that decision is still in the future, and your comments matter. Along those lines, this is not a hearing. I think Delegate Yost mentioned that. So comments that you want to have on the record for us to consider, and we're planning to spend a lot of time going through those comments and taking them very thoughtfully. You won't be surprised to know that we're going to get a lot of comments. And so if you have comments that you want to be a part of that process and a part of the record, you need to give them to us in writing. Whatever you say here today is not technically a part of the record. And we will, if you have them with you today, we'll take them with us, and they will become a part of the record. If you don't, we have some handouts somewhere. Are the handouts in the back? Yeah, the handouts have been given out, and that information is there on how to give us comments. And then the last thing I'll say, and I want to summarize what the process that we're going through. My last sort of preliminary is that, I guess just a caveat, the bad news is you're stuck with me, which means that I'm not a technical person, and so I won't necessarily be able to answer all of your technical questions, but I absolutely will make sure that I respond to what I can, and that whatever technical comments that you have, I hope that they will get into the record, and we certainly will have engineers and hydrologists and biologists and others that can respond to those. Fred Cunningham is with me. Fred is in the erosion and sediment control program. He's a little bit more technical than me. He might be able to answer more questions than I do, than I'm able to, but we will do the best that we can. And so let me just kind of, it is confusing, the process that we're in, so I'm going to review that for you quickly. I'll do it fairly quickly because I'm guessing that you guys have spent as much time thinking about the pipelining as any of us have, so this may be new to you. But I think you know that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is the organization that has to issue a certificate of public convenience and necessity. They have a lot of oversight. Part of that process is they receive an environmental impact statement, and then our part in the process is the water quality certification that FERC permit, if it's issued, certificate, if it's issued, is still subject to 401 water quality certifications. And I think you know that the Mountain Valley Pipeline is 106 miles long, goes through, it looks like it's 6 counties. This is the first of them. We received the FERC filing back in October of 15. The draft environmental impact statement was issued in September of 16. The erosion and sediment control standards were issued in February of 16, and in a minute I'll get to talking about the difference between 401 and E&S. The final EIS, environmental impact statement, was issued in June of 17, and the annual standards and specs for MVP were in June of this year. So there are sort of 5 major areas of environmental review that go into this. One is the FERC that I've talked about, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We have the nationwide, the Corps' nationwide 12 permit for wetlands and stream crossings. We have our additional 401 water quality certification that the state is doing. There is then the erosion and sediment control and stormwater rules that need to be complied with. And then the fifth thing that we are doing is we're doing some water quality and biological monitoring. Both the state is doing that, and there will be some requirements of the projects to do that. So FERC's draft environmental impact statement was received in December of 16. Many of you may have seen that we filed extensive comments with FERC about that draft EIS and asked for a considerable number of additions and enhancements to that. One of the big advantages that FERC review had for us, and we probably had, 30 staff in some form or another involved in the review of that. It enabled us to focus on what the primary areas of concern were for us. So for wetlands and stream crossings, and this has been one of the areas of maybe some confusion, is the Corps has a nationwide 12 permit that is focused only on the stream crossings and only on permanent impacts to streams and wetlands. You can only use the nationwide 12 permit for a stream crossing if there's less than a half acre of permanent impact to wetlands, and I think it's 300 feet of stream, and that's permanent impact. The nationwide 12 requires that once the pipe goes into the ground, everything has to be restored completely to its original contour, and there are a number of erosion and sediment control requirements that the state has that are part of that, and I'll talk about those in a minute. The Norfolk District of the Corps adds some things to that nationwide permit that are things like time of year restrictions for wild trout populations, countersinking requirements for pipes, time of year restrictions for water withdrawals for hydrostatic testing, and some requirements for horizontal and directional drilling. So the additional water quality certification that we're doing is a 401 certification. We are basically tag teaming with the Corps on their nationwide 12 certification. As I said, that certification is for temporary impacts to stream crossings, and everything is restored back to its original contour. As I'll say in a minute, part of that stream crossing also has some state requirements attached to it that we'll talk about in a minute. And so it is for the temporary impacts. There is, in fact, with the MVP for permanent wetlands impacts, projection of way less than a half of an acre of permanent wetlands impacts. That's what the 401 certification does. And so we added the 401, our individual 401 certification, because of additional concerns that I'll mention in a minute. I'll just say karst geology was one of the big ones. Had we used our more conventional VWP, Virginia Water Protection Permit certification, we would have had a lesser scope of authority than we have by using this certification. So that's one of the reasons that we chose it. In order to get those additional protections. So the types of things that we are concerned about in our 401 certification are especially karst protections, riparian buffer protections, unregulated surface water withdrawals that might be needed for hydrostatic testing, water quality monitoring, measures to minimize impacts from blasting and on steep slopes, and then some reporting requirements in addition to that. So in our view, the 401 certification that is the subject of the public comment period right now is intended to more comprehensively address all of the potential impacts that that there might be to the water quality certification. We could have, and in all past cases have, only done water quality certifications for pipelines through the nationwide 12th permit, and that has stood on its own. We concluded that that was insufficient in this case, and that's why we're doing that. Now, a separate program is our erosion and sediment control and stormwater programs. And those erosion and sediment control programs, in short, well, first let me say, normally E&S programs are administered by local governments, but in the case of pipelines, the E&S programs' responsibility are assigned to the department. Those programs include requiring technical criteria to meet regulatory requirements for E&S and for stormwater. How the program's administered, how notifications are made, use of certified personnel for all of their work, and those sorts of things. So we notified FERC that they would need to get both the nationwide 12 certification for this permit as well as our individual 401 certification. I'm sorry, I'm mixing them up myself. So the E&S process then involves the 401 certification does in fact refer to the E&S program, and our E&S program puts requirements on every stream crossing as well as every other foot of crossings or foot of construction. For example, pipeline might run along beside a stream for 2, 3, 4, 5 miles. You've got to have erosion and sediment control in place to make sure that the stream is protected in those instances as well. Those plans are posted online, and I'm sure many of you have seen them. And they require DEQ approval, and for the first time ever, we are making those plans available for public input, and we're looking at the public input as well. And we have, in fact, hired a consultant to help with the review of those, to make sure that those reviews are thorough and competent. I've gotten ahead of myself. So the erosion and sediment control, as I said, covers every foot of disturbance, including every stream crossing. So every stream crossing is regulated by the state under E&S. They have to comply with all of the requirements, both during and after construction. And as I said, we hired an engineer to help us with that. And I'll say that the engineers are already identifying areas where things need to be improved. As you know, for the MVP, we've had 2 public hearings. The last one was last night. The public comment period continues until the 22nd. I encourage you to make all of the written comment that you think is appropriate, that you want us to have in our hands. We will spend quite a bit of time going through those comments to make sure that we understand the science of the law, and we feel like we have adequate understanding of all the issues that are out there. And then we expect to be able to take it to a board meeting this fall. The timing of that, though, is really going to be dependent on, we absolutely are going to make sure that we take the time to understand all of the comments and feel like we have adequately addressed them. And then the last thing I'll mention, and we can get to questions, is we are planning to do some extensive water quality monitoring, both pre-construction and, if it's approved, post-construction, so that we can be aware of water quality impacts and that we can assure ourselves that there aren't any long-term water quality impacts that were unexpected and need to be addressed. So I think Delegate Yost, that probably took more than my 15 minutes, and I'll be happy to take any comments or questions at this point.
Thank you, Director. We're going to go ahead and get started with questions. So if number 1 can come up, the microphone is right here. We have 55 people signed up to speak or ask questions within the next hour and a half. So, Susan?
My name is Susan Edwards. I live in Newport. Thank you, Delegate Yost and Delegate Habib, for organizing this meeting today on behalf of your beleaguered and frightened constituents. Thank you, Director Taylor, for actually coming to Newport instead of Richmond or Newport News to listen to our concerns. The Virginia Department of Environmental Quality is our first line of defense to protect Virginia's water against shoddy construction practices that would destroy precious water and habitat for Virginia residents and animals. I admit to many times during the past 3 years to feeling like an endangered species that no federal or state agency will listen to or care about. NextEra is an out-of-state corporation with a criminal history of shoddy construction practices. The data they have submitted to the FERC to support this project is filled with inaccurate and downright false information, and they refuse to correct even when they are repeatedly shown what is wrong, and we back our corrections with scientific data from world-renowned authorities. Your department knows that aquifers running through karst topography are interconnected and can run for miles, feeding wells and springs that are necessary for people and animals in rural areas to survive. Why are you refusing to consider our steep slopes and slip soils that are so easily eroded? The spring-fed creek that runs through my property is filled with these soils even after a 1-inch rain. The hillsides above this creek are heavily forested and vegetation covered, and still rocky soils spill our little creek. I have ruts. I have seen my neighbor struggle to keep his steep driveway from becoming unusable from ruts from heavy rain. There is no mitigation plan that they can submit that will stop the erosion of these slopes into our water sources once the construction has begun. Your department will not have the funding to correct this destruction, and it will be your fault that you allowed this to happen in the first place. The plan submitted by MVP will include the destruction of mountaintops, old-growth forest, unsegmented forest land, and miles of viewshed from the iconic Appalachian Trail, as well as Virginia byways and the windows and porches of our own homes. Did I forget to mention, this project will plow through 8 historic districts. Why are you bullying your department's employees to side with a corporation that will destroy what you have been mandated to protect? Grow a pair and don't throw us under the Army Corps of Engineers bus. Do your job.
Number 2.
I brought some of my water. I'm a 7th-generation property owner. My line is just right down here where the fence is, just before you got to this building. All the way through Newport and around the old road. My name is Lynn Williams, and I have a plea for you. Mr. Paylor, why are we here? It's because we have great fear of contamination of our water and springs, which are so pure as they flow and sing, deep in the earth or on top of the ground. rippling over rocks with silent fury and sound. This acute fear causes our hearts to sting, since if the pipeline is built, there will be no flame. Based on our experience with the MVP, 'tis difficult for any of us to see. They've told the truth about Little here, so we have a very great deal to fear. Giles County is a most special place, created by the hand of God's grace. With more karst than any other county, we enjoy this aspect of nature's bounty. We treasure our branches, brooks, and creeks. The serenity they give us, others come to seek. A Chinese proverb says about life's great fluid, remember the spring before it's polluted. Simply put, in water, there is life. And this mammoth pipeline is a knife, endangering our life through our water, threatening the future of sons and daughters. Many get their water through a sweet bubbling spring, rising through the karst filter as it softly sings. Others find sustenance from a deep well. It still comes from the karst we love so swell. Giles is a place where nature brings smiles. With bad water, there'll be naught but trials. When our wells essentially run dry, then 'twill be much too late to cry. Apologies will not be sweet solace to state water leaders' stupid follies. We have been lonely voices in the forest, realizing the effect this can have on our tourists. MVP has falsely seduced the state with lies about jobs, and the leaders have ignored our cries. The state has the ability to protect our blues and greens. Don't let MVP change our hues into water not clean. So to you, Mr. Paler, we most earnestly plead, don't let this project proceed. In our Eden, it's greed. Likely our karst and water will be destroyed as the natural gas seeps into our slit soils. Audrey Hepburn said, water is life, and clean water means health. Mr. Paler, we want clean water, not MVP's quick buck wealth. No wholesale permit for MVP's crossing of creeks and streams, lest we hear the fish and wildlife hereabouts scream. Don't let it be. Water, water everywhere, yet none fit to drink, since our leaders allowed a natural gas pipeline to sink. If courage you have, you could change the story and ease the great fear we have over our water worry. Thank you.
I'm Earl Irwin, a resident of Montgomery County outside of Blacksburg, Virginia. At the formal DEQ hearing in Radford on Tuesday, the DEQ distributed a statement of purpose stating that only comments related to the conditions being proposed will be considered. Yet the first 50 minutes of presentations were about supposed economic advantages, including jobs and access to fossil fuel, that construction of the pipeline allegedly will facilitate. My question is, what has DEQ done with the non-pertinent information? Has it truly deleted it from the materials that DEQ is reviewing in consideration of the proposed Section 401 certification? The concern of the majority of the citizens who presented at that hearing is not about jobs. Whether the pipeline brings one job or thousands is immaterial. The issue is clean water. The citizens of the Commonwealth cannot work or thrive in polluted wastelands that ultimately will result when our clean water sources are destroyed. I ask the DEQ to consider the experiences of other states. In my native Ohio, the Ohio EPA is now immersed in battles with the Pipeline Corporation, Energy Transfer Partners, over the Rover pipeline and its destruction and devastation that its construction is wreaking. The Ohio EPA unsuccessfully has been trying to negotiate with ETP to resolve all of their past violations, to get them to submit to revised contingency plans, and to pay the levied fines that ETP is refusing to pay. Ohio EPA Director Craig Butler has said that the Rover pipeline officials have held the position that Ohio has no authority to hold them accountable to state laws under the Clean Water Act, the Drinking Water Act, or the Clean Air Act. What makes the Virginia DEQ think that experiences in our state will be any different from those in Ohio? Ohio EPA is dealing with Rover violations such as pollution into reservoirs, streams, and wetlands and creeks, and drilling mud and diesel fuel spills into wetlands. Ohio faces all these environmental problems without even having to deal with the karst issues that pipelines through Virginia will create. Our own Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation has said that currently proposed mitigations for pipeline penetration through karst geography are inadequate because unanticipated releases in karst landscapes have the potential to travel more than 500 feet and impact wells, cave streams, and springs. Both the MVP and the ACP are behind schedule according to the involved company's original plans. Once construction is underway, it's likely to be hasty and slipshod as the corporations rush to get natural gas and hence their profits flowing at full capacity. Shortcuts that disregard the environment and original agreements for protections will not be different from those occurring in Ohio right now. Virginia DEQ and the State Water Control Board can protect the waters of the Commonwealth, which also are the waters of the United States, and save itself the legal battles that the Ohio EPA now faces by declining to issue a 401 construction permit. Thank you.
There were a couple questions in there that I maybe can respond to. One of them is all the comments are on the record. Comments that are not pertinent, we don't respond to. And I would say that how many people get employed, you're right, is not a pertinent question to water quality. Should the pipeline be approved, one of the things that we have already made plans to do is to hire a consistent inspector process throughout the installation time, so that if it is approved, we expect to have eyes on the ground throughout the whole process and hold the project to all the laws. And I'm not aware of any reason that we would not have full legal authority to prosecute any violations that happen if it comes to that.
Number 4.
My name is David Walker. I've been a long time resident of the Newport area. I have a few questions here that I really want to get straightened out. I'm not going to pontificate too much. But my first question is, does the DEQ actually have the power to kill this process?
If we are unable to determine that there's a reasonable assurance that water quality will be protected, that would give us the legal authority to kill the project.
All right, what's your definition of a reasonable assurance that it will be protected? Major corporations all over the nation or whatever have fast-tracked all kinds of projects. They have cut corners, the Exxon Valdez, the BP cut-off valve or whatever down in the Gulf, and Bhopal over in India. All of these, that was overseas. But there's no oversight, nobody even protects anything. So why should we trust you to do what would be in our best interest as an entity of the state government, or is this just another level of bureaucratic process that we just have to go through, that they say we have to go through, that just rubber stamps everything?
My definition of reasonable assurance is that if the technical folks have reason to believe that the measures in place are protective, then we have reasonable assurance. So it, in some sense, is a technology-based assessment.
Now, who hires these technical consultants? Is this done by MVP, Next Area QT, or is it done by your department?
Well, the
Personally, that's-
technical consultants for the erosion and sediment control program, which is separate from 401, are hired by us. It's EEE Consulting, and the inspectors that we will have, should the project be approved, would also be hired by us.
Okay.
I might just add, we recognize, as Dave has indicated, that, these plans have to meet the requirements to protect water quality. And one of the most important things is, a plan is only as good as it's being implemented. And that's why the agency is committed to having inspectors out there to make sure, if plans get approved, to make sure plans are implemented if the agency approves them.
Now, on the water crossings, do you monitor each and every one of those before and after in order to do that? Or is, from what I understand, it being deferred to the U.S. Corps of Engineers?
Well, the water crossings, compliance with the rules of the water crossings would be both the Corps' responsibility under the nationwide 12 and our responsibility under the erosion and sediment control.
So does that mean that both of you all are going to be monitoring these at the same time, or is the...
I'm not prepared to say who's going to be there for which crossings, but we're going to have a consistent presence out there.
Okay, one last question. Why should anybody in this room believe another layer of bureaucracy coming from a government who seems to turn a blind eye to what the constituents are, the people that live here, whatever, have, and not opposed to whatever big money, big corporations bring in? Why should we trust what you have to say?
If you look at the track record of the Department of Environmental Quality, air's gotten cleaner, water's gotten cleaner. We've made huge progress with the authorities that we have in the last 40 years. I've been in this business for 40 years, and we can take the time some other time. I can tell you all of the improvements in water quality and air quality that we've made in the last 40 years. It's a great track record.
Backsliding does happen.
I might add, just for erosion and sediment control as well as stormwater management, the state has put in for stormwater management new requirements that have come into effect as of July of 2014. Those new requirements address both quality and quantity aspects of stormwater runoff. And, again, those requirements for the plans that we're reviewing have to meet those new requirements.
Last question, this is for both of you. Have you read the report that Dr. Ernst Kasking did on karst topography? Have you personally read it, and do you have some reason to disbelieve what his results were?
I have not personally read it, but I will, am making sure that our technical folks do personally read it, and we will have discussions about what's the right interpretation of it.
I have not personally read it either.
Would you be willing to read it?
I will make sure that appropriate technical people read that and I get the appropriate information on those reports. I may end up reading the entire thing, entire report. I've got a lot of other responsibilities, but I recognize that it's important for us to make sure we evaluate all technical reports from experts in all areas as part of their evaluation of this project.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, gentlemen. That's all I have to say.
My wife and I have lived in Newport for the past 42 years. Thank you for holding this hearing, this session, and thank Mr. Yost and Mr. Habib for arranging it. Water is the key to life. When searching for life beyond the earth, we look for water. City folk tend to take potable water for granted. just open the tap and let it flow. I doubt if many urban dwellers have the faintest idea of where their water comes from. Country folk are keenly aware of water. This is a rural area, the Greater Newport Rural Historic District. When my wife and I started looking for land to turn into a horse farm, a primary consideration was the presence of water. On the 60 acres we found, there was a stream, Clover Hollow Branch. That sealed the deal. But for the house, and later the kennel and the barn, we had to drill a 350-foot deep well. After a really hard rain, the water that comes out of the tap from that 350-foot deep well is yellow and a bit silty. We're very aware of what happens to our water. Farmers who raise cattle and sheep and pigs and chickens and rabbits pay a lot of attention to their water. Their well-being and the well-being of their animals depends on it. Their livelihood depends on it. The proposed MVP threatens the water of Giles County and hence the lives of its inhabitants. It is insane to think that a company that has never built a 42-inch diameter pipeline and has never built a pipeline through mountainous terrain could build one here safely. As you are aware, the proposed pipeline would come within 100 feet of this building. Have you looked at the mountains on either side of 42 as you drove through Newport to this meeting? Do you really think a pipeline could be built going up and down these mountains and not have serious ramifications for the water we so desperately need? Not only would the sediment caused by the runoff foul streams such as Greenbrier Branch, just behind this building, and Sinking Creek, just across the road, but the disruption to the water table in our karst topography caused by the drilling and blasting cannot be avoided. Assert otherwise to outright lie. I urge you to look around as you drive through and ask yourself, seriously? Please deny the permits. Save our water, save our village, save our way of life. Thank you.
Number 6.
Good afternoon. I'm a landowner here in Giles County, within a half a mile of this pipeline. My well will be affected, I'm quite sure. I have a question, however. According to a presentation you made in 2012 on Pipeline Permitting 101, if that rings a bell, you stated that a project designated as a PSD, Prevention of Significant Deterioration, permit typically takes 18 to 24 months and requires the demonstration that the design incorporates the best available control technology. If the MVP is not a PSD, what in the heck is? And why is DEQ not taking a typical amount of time to study the BACT in the depth it requires?
The PSD program is an air permitting program, and PSD would apply to a compressor station, but those requirements have nothing to do with the laying of a pipeline or a flood pipe.
The draft 401 certification makes no mention or conditions for how MVP's product will affect recreational uses of our water, and what MVP must do to mitigate such impacts. This is a disregard for how the public sees and uses water for fishing, swimming, and general aesthetic use. How will DEQ ensure that recreational uses will remain fully protected during and after construction as required by Virginia law?
I think that's a good comment, and I hope it's one that you will make in writing so that we can determine if additional changes are warranted and additional requirements are warranted.
The MVP route will result in degradation to the headwaters of 3 first-order streams in Giles County alone. These are prime recreational resources for the county and account for a significant income for its citizens. The degradation will result in a decrease in the groundwater table that supplies its residents with drinking water, water for livestock, crops, and for recreation. DEQ has not addressed these water uses, which are vital to the citizens of Giles and are protected. I ask DEQ to respond to its mission to protect and enhance our environment by doing the in-depth analysis of all water usage, of erosion and sediment impacts, and of ditrase studies we expect of it prior to making a recommendation to the Water Control Board. Thank you very much.
Number 7. And while Tom is coming to the microphone, if we can go ahead and get numbers 8, 9, and 10 in the queue, somewhere along the aisle right here, just so we can move it along.
Hi, my name is Tom Hoffman. I live in Harrisburg. And Mr. Taylor, I would like to know why the DEQ, and FERC for that matter, hasn't asked MVP to consider building the pipeline on what's called hybrid alternative 1A. This alignment would cause far less disturbance to water resources than karst, because there's not as much karst there. It would avoid the Appalachian Trail and not need as many eminent domain seasons, and it would avoid historic villages and a lot of the streams and wetlands that are in these historic villages. There's something for everybody in Alternative 1A. You get your jobs, you get your economic development, and you get your water resources protected with less cost. Alternative 1A would follow the lowlands, and so does Route 460. And there's a reason that they built 460 where they did, because if MVP were building 460, it'd go straight up and down like this, and you wouldn't you'd need a 4-wheel drive to get on the darn thing. And so I want to know why DEQ isn't asking MVP to consider hybrid alternative 1A. And everybody out there, whether you want the pipeline or not, just get in touch with your elected officials and tell them that hybrid 1A would be a lot better and just cause a lot less discord and unhappiness and everything else. You know, so far as water is concerned, there's a reason people don't live in deserts. And there's a reason people didn't stay in the Dust Bowl back in the 30s when you had a severe drought and everything went dry, and they had to leave and go to California. And, you know, water is life. I agree with that. Thank you.
Over pipeline routing, we did make some comments that related to routing in the draft environmental impact statement. It's a FERC decision. That all said, I think that would be a useful comment for us to have in the record. Thanks.
Number 8.
Hi. Pardon us if we seem a little distressed. We've been working on this for 3 years now, and we've run into some major untruths and inaccuracies that we haven't been able to get around, and that's why we're all so upset. My question to you today concerns the water to my farm. My farm is watered by an ephemeral stream that comes down from the back of Gap Mountain. It's spring-fed. Also, I have springs coming in from both sides of the rim of my valley. We know for a fact that one of those springs has been in effect since before the Civil War. And people in Clover Hollow still know about that spring and come to get water there when their wells can't be used because the power goes out. We know from past dye testing done in the Clover Hollow area that water can move underground through the karst topography there for up to 7 miles. I don't know where the water comes from that feeds my creek and my springs, but I sure know that I need that creek and those springs. My concern is that you don't know where the water comes from that feeds my creek and my springs either. And I would ask that further dye testing be done, because once you start the construction for that pipeline and start the blasting and the passage of the heavy equipment that they're going to use over our fragile karst, I may lose the underground passages that provide me with the water I need, not only for my own use, for my livestock's use, and for the 250 different kinds of plants growing there, the 53 kinds of birds that use my place, and the 17 different mammal species. I care about all these things, and I hope very much that you people care too. Do you plan to do any comprehensive dye study work?
We do plan to require dye study work in areas that have been identified in conjunction with DCR. We consulted DCR on areas where dye studies might be useful. I don't know if your property is one of those, but I would strongly encourage you to point it out in the record so that we can take a look and see if dye studies make sense there as well.
Thank you very much. One more thing. Your focus is on stream crossings, but please remember, in this area, the primary movement of water is underground. Underground. And once you crush the karst topping, we may or may not have our water supply.
Completely agree, and that's one of the reasons that we're taking the approach that we are, because we are particularly focused on the karst and to make sure that that's protected.
Thank you very much.
Number 9, and before we get started with that, I want to take a moment and recognize State Senator John Edwards, who just joined us, for coming here today.
Hello, I'm Scott Geller, and thank you for coming. Will you look at these folks? This is a work day, and they're here too, because we all do care. So, listen, I never read a speech before. I'm a professor. And when I've been told to read this, and at the end of this month, I will start my 49th year as a professor of psychology at Virginia Tech. So I would like to talk about the human element, the human dynamics of the proposed pipeline crisis. And yes, it is a crisis, and it's causing severe distress among numerous citizens of Virginia. I did say distress, not stress. You know, stress is okay. It means you are under pressure to accomplish something, under the gun to get things done. Stress is actually motivating, and it is not debilitating. In contrast, distress is debilitating and painful, both physically and psychologically. This proposed pipeline crisis is causing severe distress among the majority of residents who understand the devastating environmental impact of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Why distress and not stress? The difference between motivating stress and debilitating distress is the perception of personal control. When people believe they can control a stressor, they feel stress, and they work hard to conquer the stressor and achieve. The proposed MVP is a stressor, and for more than 3 years, citizens throughout Southwest Virginia worked hard to remove that stressor. They sponsored rallies, conducted neighborhood surveys, wrote newspaper editorials, and produced professional videos to increase public awareness and garner anti-MVP support. They hired geologists and lawyers to make the science-based case that the proposed MVP route is unsafe and dramatically destructive to the environment and its resources, including water, a life necessity. They wrote data-based opposition letters to FERC, explaining the irrationality of the proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline. Yet it seems none of these stressor reduction strategies have yet worked to dissuade the construction of the proposed MVP. At the same time, these dedicated and hardworking American citizens must listen to the irrational and ill-informed dialogue from those advocating for the proposed MVP. It will bring us new jobs. It will bring needed industry to Roanoke. It will improve our economy. All of this seems to be about greed, in lieu of environmental destruction and the potential risk of devastating explosions and water contamination. Those who know realize the advocates of the proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline care only about temporary monetary gain. And it seems FERC is paying more attention to this weak and short-sighted rationale than the people-focused reasoning of those opposing the proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline. Those citizens who have become well-informed of the devastating and life-threatening consequences of the proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline, which will only benefit a few greedy individuals. The result, a debate between a rational perspective to save environmental resources for generations of residents versus an obvious, irrational, and self-serving perspective that will destroy irreplaceable resources and put numerous citizens at risk for water contamination and a gas explosion. The thought that the irrational proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline could actually be built in spite of the hard work to gather overwhelming evidence that the proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline would cause significant harm to people and their environment fuels debilitating human distress. And such distress is fueled by the observation that FERC has not even considered the data that shows the irrationality of building the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. People listen to evidence that supports their initial opinion, and they deny opposing information. Realizing that this is happening over and over by the Federal Energy Regulating Commission is truly distressing. Your help to put some science-based rationality in this critical decision-making process will be therapeutic. Specifically, I'm asking the DEQ to please review carefully all of the critical information on the proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline that has been collected, analyzed, and shared with FERC. We need the Department of Environmental Quality to be well informed of the devastating and long-lasting consequences this proposed pipeline will have on our environment and its resources, including our water. Thank you for the time and consideration.
Number 10, and if I can get 11, 12, and 13 to line up along the wall. It is 2 o'clock. We have exactly 1 hour and 45 people to get through, and I fully intend to get through all 45 people. So,
Why is he saying that to me? My name is Rick Shingles. I sent you that document, which, thank you. It lists 4 hydrogeologist reports
those people, after they got their education, had between them 150 years of practice. And thank you very much for acknowledging and receiving them. I wanted to make a remark about Professor Geller's comments about health. Just very quickly, there's a relatively small cadre of people in these counties who've been leading for 3 years now. 2 of them have had heart attacks, 2 have had strokes, and 1 had a psychological breakdown. So there really is our stressors here. I wanted to just talk about facts and assumptions. These reports you get about like what's temporary, what's long-term, whether a mitigation plan will actually work or not are based on facts and assumptions. The Mountain Valley Pipeline and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission discussions of these, of the various issues pertaining to this are full of questionable facts and questionable assumptions. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, or at least it's a request to ask you, is when you look at that information, particularly the engineering mitigation plans provided by Mountain Valley Pipeline, that you just be cautious about the questions, assumptions, whether you're getting the complete information. In those reports that were provided to you, in the shorter documents or comments to FERC, there's plenty of challenges to those documents. One of the concerns I have, and other people have, and were mentioned at the Radford meeting the other night, is something we're confused about from reading the documents from DEQ. And it has to do with what appears to be the segmentation of how DEQ will deal with erosion and sedimentation. So if you could clarify that in a minute, we would probably all benefit. And our concern, the reason probably why we're asking these questions, is that if you break these things up into small topics, which have, one person's responsible over here for one set of issues, another over there, then the larger issues here above individual stream crossings, which involve compound geological hazards, or cumulative effects downstream, the 2 elements that the 4 geologists came to agree on. We're afraid that that's the larger picture which you have to understand any one particular stream, or whether the effects on one stream will be temporary or long-term. We're concerned that that'll simply be missed. Just to give an example from Giles County is 8% karst. We have just one slope after the other going through this county. Many of these slopes have weak soils on them. In one of the reports that we sent to you, we specify exactly what those soils are and where they are. There are several locations in Giles County where there's a very steep slope of the weak soil coming right down on karst or right down on a creek. Right around here in Zell's Mill Road, the pipeline is supposed to go over Sinking Creek, which has that name for a particular reason. And that slope, for example, has one of these soils on it. One of these 4 geologists is here tonight, Dr. Ernst Castings, and he's going to offer to show you that. It's just right down the road a bit. Maybe you have a chance to look at it before you leave. I think you were already told about that. So if you would elaborate about our confusion from reading your documents about the segmentation of erosion and sedimentation issues, it would be very helpful. Thank you.
It's fairly simple. The erosion and sediment control law and regulations and stormwater regulations are separate regulatory authorities with separate processes, so there really isn't a way to do the 2 together. However, it's not either or, it's both and. For a project to proceed, it's got to be approved on both fronts, but we don't really have a regulatory way to pull the 2 together.
Just a quick follow-up. What do you have in place once those separate analyses are done to bring them together to get the total picture?
I guess I would say it's, if both are approved, it's the compliance piece that when we have inspectors on site as work is being done, they will be aware of all the requirements from both.
I got to tell you, we think if you actually put it all together beforehand, you would not approve, you would not get the certificate.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Tony. I'm Tony Williams, and I grew up here in Newport. I have a question for you. Do you think this Mountain Valley Pipeline enhances Virginia's environment?
The answer I have to give you is that we have certain laws that we are charged with administering, and we are administering those laws based on the applications that we've gotten.
Okay. Do you make your decisions based on your DEQ's mission statement?
We make our decision based on the laws of the science, as I said earlier, and the laws are there to enable us to accomplish our mission.
Right. Well, let me read you your mission statement here. DEQ protects and enhances Virginia's environment and promotes the health and well-being of the citizens of the Commonwealth. And we might be very few citizens here at Newport, but we are the citizens. I have owned property that's surrounded by Sinking Creek. There's a spring on it that feeds my aunt and uncle's water supply, also to the farmhouse that I own, and I think there's a couple other families that get that spring water. And you were talking about water crossings. Are you going to be, is DEQ the one that's going to be responsible for identifying all these individual crossings and boundaries and of waters affected and all of the individuals that are affected? Who's going to be the one that identifies all those bodies and streams of water affected?
Well, the water crossings are identified in the application itself, so they have been identified.
Right. Well, I have a deeded water right to my property, and no one has contacted me in regard to any water crossing or anything. So that's why I was asking. I want to be on public record that, to ask you to not to issue this section 401 certificate to the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And based on your mission statement, your vision statement, I don't see how you could. I don't even know why you would jeopardize your mission, even thinking about it, really. But the lack of communication with the Mountain Valley Pipeline, with myself as a landowner near the proposed pipeline, who has a water right of deeded public record in Giles County. And the spring I have is on land within the proposed pipeline construction. And I asked you about who was going to identify the landowners and how that would be regulated. And then you're responsible, right, for the protection of the drinking water and the bodies of waters. Imagine the devastation to the property and the forest and the fields and the landscapes and the animal and the plant life, and yes, all those bodies of water, Sinking Creek and our spring, in the path of this destruction of this proposed pipeline. And this destruction, it just doesn't go with your mission statement. That's what I don't understand. I mean, if you have the authority to stop this, it does not go with your mission statement. Sinking Creek it forms a horseshoe around the 1870s historical farmhouse that I own, and it meanders all through the farm. And as a child, I drank straight from the spring water after a hard play or working in my grandfather's garden, and I swam in Sinking Creek. And somebody's already addressed the recreational issues, but we have a park down here that has the water, Sinking Creek, the body of water that runs right by our public park. And we'd like to know how you're going to protect all the recreational waters as well. No public water or sewer is offered to the properties, and a lot of properties here. You know, Newport has some, but it stops. There's no grant money to be offered. And all these hollers and valleys, we're dependent on the water for our livelihoods as our households and for our livestock. They even have MVP even has my property showed incorrectly on their maps. So, you know, you need to do your own surveys and not rely on all the surveys that they're providing you too, because they're totally inaccurate. As a landowner and a Virginia taxpayer, I ask you to guide your DEQ organization to be in line with your mission statement. That's what I'm asking. The DEQ must use their full authority under the Clean Water Act to stop this pipeline. Ask yourself who is to benefit from this pipeline. Many Virginians will benefit from the pipeline, other than large, and they'll mostly will be large corporations and banks and lending institutions that are helping construct this. I want my daughter and my future grandchildren to be able to drink from that same mountain spring that I drank from as a child. And I want them to have recreational activities on that sinking creek that I've described to you. Consider the 7th and 8th generation of this farm. And I ask you not to issue 401 certification to the MVP pipeline. Thank you.
Greetings. I just wanted to say thanks to both of you for coming out and sitting in the hot seat, and Delegates Yost and Habib and Edwards for joining us today. I know it's not an enviable position, but I can tell you're taking it pretty thoughtfully, so I appreciate that. I'm not a Giles County landowner, although I wish I was. I work on the Appalachian National Scenic Trail, and we, in a way, share a mission with DEQ. The Appalachian Trail protects the headwaters and a third of the country's drinking water. And so we take issues that affect drinking water, not only for our users, but all our volunteers and all the country very seriously. You know, I've worked real hard in the past to do things like establish federally designated wilderness, but I've also worked very hard to site and accommodate energy infrastructure like power lines and pipelines. And we try to take a very practical project-by-project approach at the Appalachian Trail Conservancy to each project. There are 58 pipelines across the AT right now, and Mountain Valley Pipeline is the only one that we have ever opposed. And we do this by looking at specific project parameters and looking at the public's ability to understand that project. And so I'll just give you one example quickly, I'll try to be brief here, where the public wasn't involved in a critical water quality process associated with the environmental impact statement. The draft environmental impact statement established a 90-day public comment period. That on the 89th day, on the 23rd hour, and we're not talking about the 11th hour, we're talking the 89th day of the 23rd hour, the applicant filed significant project changes along with the high hazard analysis for this project. The high hazard analysis includes the area going up to the Appalachian Trail, going down from the Appalachian Trail, areas of significant blasting and areas that will significantly impact water. The public, all the people who care about their water you see before you, had 1 hour of the public comment period to review that high hazard analysis. For me, that's pretty unacceptable. You know, if a high school student waited that long to do homework, I would expect the top quality report to be handed in. That's not the worst of what's happened though. When you get to the final environmental impact statement, the corridor mitigation, what will protect all of us and our water from landslides, from erosion, has not been finalized, has not been agreed upon by the applicant. In the FEIS, they say specific guidelines to mitigate impacts in the corridor may occur or may not occur. So the public has had no ability to understand what actual threats their water quality are under. To this day, the applicant has not agreed to specific corridor mitigation standards that would protect all of our water. Now, well, the reason I come in here, because it also protects viewsheds of the Appalachian National Scenic Trail. So one other critical component, they've submitted all this information super late into the record. It's critical for water quality. The FEIS still does not establish what will occur in the corridor to mitigate water quality issues, but a third specific requirement of NEPA has not been met. And that's a programmatic requirement to look at the cumulative impact of all pipelines, all similar projects as they cross through the Commonwealth. As we know, there's another pipeline project further north. MVP did not do a significant analysis on a co-located alternative. Now, some advocates for pipelines may say we need this for job growth, and maybe they're right or maybe they're wrong. But analysis should be given to a co-located alternative so that you have the best understanding of what might be on the table as far as impact, and the ability to cut that impact in half. A single 48-inch pipeline could carry the load and more than MVP would have, and then we wouldn't need Mountain Valley Pipeline. So the analysis done in the MVP, DEIS, and FEIS was drastically insufficient for decision-making purposes, and frankly, well below Virginia's DEQ self-established standard. And so I'd like you to consider those things very seriously. I assume that if I submit comments in writing that you guys will reply in writing, so I don't need any questions answered. But what I want to leave you with is the fact that this shoddy analysis, this analysis that had been offered to the public 89 days into a 90-day public comment period, is not the standard we should hold ourselves to. We should hold ourselves to the very highest standard, so we all know and can agree upon the impacts to our national parks, to our water, and to our communities, and that has not been achieved with Mountain Valley Pipeline.
Before you continue, I will ask again just to be cognizant of the time. It is 2:23, number 13. If you have specific questions, please ask them. If you have comments that you would like to make, it would be easier if we could just submit them to us and we'll get them to DEQ, because I want everybody to have a chance to ask a question.
Thank you. I'm going to make brief comments, and I have one question. I'm Diana Christopoulos. I'm president of the Roanoke Appalachian Trail Club, a separate 501c3 from the Conservancy. We maintain 120 miles of the trail in this region, including the part that goes right through here up over Sinking Creek Mountain. And I wanted to just share one impression with you in terms of working with MVP and the FERC. We are dramatically affected on the AT by this pipeline. We offered to work with them. That filing about high hazard areas that was made on December 22nd was not, we didn't find it until May of this year. They did not communicate with us from May 2016 until we finally got a meeting with them on June 15th of 2017. They did all their analysis of the AT without ever communicating with us. We did get a live meeting. My filing today that you will have is basically based on the filings that I made to the FERC as a result of that meeting. I just want to quick mention what's in it. First of all, in terms of the science, and I appreciate the science is important. By the way, I appreciate you coming here without a police car, because we're nice people. We don't need a police car. The filing that I had in terms of science, the best science that we have for putting a pipeline in this kind of terrain is the Columbia-Celanese pipeline over Peters Mountain that was supervised by the Forest Service, close communication and planning with the AT, and it's a mess. And I presented, and you'll see the pictures, what it looks like in its fourth year, and it's Google Earth screenshots that I did that morning. It's hideous. It's wider today than it was the day they built it, and they use best management practices. So we're extremely concerned about steep slopes. And I have pretty extensive filings about that, combined with the high hazard areas and a description of it. So that's all I want to say about that. My second is switching into being a citizen of the city of Salem, which is in the Roanoke River watershed, has over 120 crossings of the river and its tributaries, before it gets to the run-of-the-river water supply for our city. We don't have the analysis that we need right now. And I'm really glad Mr. Cunningham's here, because I looked online, I've been looking as recently as this morning, whereas ACP, to my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, has filed responses to all the questions that they were asked for erosion and sedimentation. We can look at that data. I looked at the ACP website, and I believe it is there, and it's stated that it's there in the DEQ website. However, first of all, Mountain Valley Pipeline, for reasons I don't really understand, is allowed to submit their stuff piecemeal until August 25th. Yet, both of us, ACP and MVP, have the same comment period, October. Right now, they've made one filing, spread 8. Spread 9, and so it has nothing in the Roanoke River, it's jobs. Spread 9, which begins the Roanoke River, is 2 weeks late. It's still not there this morning. And I guess my question is, would you consider having an equitable comment period on erosion and sedimentation, that when MVP finishes its filings, that we get the clock started, just like it started for ACP when they made their filings, which was around July 6th. Because I don't think it's fair, and I've been in discussions with staff from a couple of the cities. I'll give you an example. The only really good study we had was the one the Forest Service required them to do inside Jefferson National Forest. And they stated that erosion and sedimentation from the Roanoke River from this project would run all the way through Salem and Roanoke to Niagara Dam and Smith Mountain Lake if it's not contained. I think they've made some pretty outrageous claims about how much of it they can contain, but even that, a 2% a year or so, from that one little piece of the Roanoke River watershed, would represent about 13% of the total daily maximum load that this city has. And that's a tiny part of the watershed. We need the science. And we don't have any of it for the Roanoke River except for that one piece. And we need to understand what is the impact for me as a person that pays for stormwater fees and it gets my drinking water directly out of the Roanoke River. We have none of that information. I'm asking whether you would consider a change in the comment period that's more equitable when MVP, which we know is notoriously late with their filings, finally provides the information.
Both companies have the option of, both companies had the option of how they want to submit their plans. Okay? They can do them all at once, or they can do them in what they call spreads, which is a different area. MVP has chosen to do it through spreads, and based on how they have set it up, we've allowed for this input period where you can provide comments, which will end October 13th. Okay? One of the reasons why, and we have done, in the way we're reviewing these plans, it's really a two-step process. The first step is a completeness review to make sure that they have the key elements required for both erosion and sediment control as well as stormwater management. We completed that for spread 8 for the MVP pipeline. As a result of that, and there were significant comments that we provided the company. As a result of that, they are going back and making changes to spread 8 as well as the other spreads they haven't submitted yet to make the corrections that are necessary. So that's why their process has been delayed some. I guess from our perspective, because you only need to be looking at plans that are of concern to you, we are committing to at least ensuring that once the plans do get posted, that there is a 30-day comment period.
And would you consider having public hearings, since that's the piece, the erosion and sedimentation for all these downriver communities is by far the largest impact, because we don't have it coming right through town. But in the case of Salem, for example, it's just upriver. It's not more than 10 miles. We know that it's going to come down the river. Both of them, weirdly, and you know how it goes, the South Fork and the North Fork come together. Even though the pipelines, going, it doesn't look like that's how it would happen. We're getting all the sediment from both the North Fork and the South Fork coming down the main stem.
Under both state law and state regulations, there's no requirement for a public comment period for erosion and sediment control plans, nor stormwater management plans.
Yes, sir.
That being said, the agency has committed to this period of time where we are going to look at all comments related to the plans. And we encourage people to look at the plans, give us specific comments related to issues that you have associated with the plans. We've gotten actually one comment so far from an individual, and it happens to be on the ACP plans, where the individual has provided very specific comments in terms of issues that he has identified that we are going to have to look at to make sure that those plans are correct.
Yes, sir, I understand that. In fact, we have several experts that are willing to do that for the Roanoke River watershed, but they can't do it until they have the information. But my further question is, even though you're not required by law to do it, because it has such a dramatic potential impact on the citizens of Salem and Roanoke and other communities downstream, probably all the way to Smith Mountain Lake, would you not consider having public hearings so the public could have a chance to understand what you thought was going on and provide their responses to it?
My best answer for right now is that we're going to look at the comments that we get, and we will have to evaluate what the next steps are once we see the comments.
Okay, thank you.
Welford Dowdy Farm on Old Furnace Road in Newport, Virginia. Please do not recommend issuance of Section 401 certificate to Mountain Valley Pipeline. No matter how many certificates are approved, this pipeline will be a devastation to this family farm as well as many historic areas in the community of Newport, Virginia. The clearing, the mowing, the grubbing, the trenching, the blasting, the pipe welding, it cannot be safely conducted without tremendous threat to our endangered species and habitat. Our family spring, which is the only source of water to my sister's home and to our rental property, will be jeopardized. Any activity that will disturb the wetlands and farm stream by the above construction should not be approved. DEQ should listen to the people who provide them with honest information, not MVP. MVP, as of this date, still does not admit and will not admit to all the dishonest information submitted to FERC, allowing them to obtain a certificate to build this pipeline only for greed, not necessity. Please, please do not issue the Section 401 certificate to MVP. Thank you.
My wife had just spoke, and my son just before that. Hi, Joseph. I'm going to keep mine very short. I'll try to finish off here in about 30 minutes if you... I also urge you, do not issue this certificate. It is extremely important. My wife and her 5-generation family members are owners of the property of historic value, which I know you have no concern. Yours is the environment. I'm going to switch it right now to the environment. I am a 38-year person in metalworking fabrication business. I know what leaching of rust into the water system does. I know what welds do. And I asked you a question. Do you know if they are going to be certified welders by the American Weld Society D11? Can I have an answer to that sooner or later? I did turn in the paper.
I don't know. I believe that's under FERC jurisdiction.
It may be, but it's also under the environment. I also would like to know if they will be certified welders doing this, and if they will be doing inspection reports that are turned in to you so that you will know what's going on.
I believe again that that's FERC jurisdiction.
Wow, I can't believe this. I think maybe the people in Flint, Michigan had the same problem, didn't they? I will finish off. I know we're getting a little close on time. I urge you, please
please get involved in this thing and find out what's going on, and do not issue the certificate to MVP. Thank you.
Yeah. 16. And if I can have 17, 18, 19, 20, be ready to go.
Welcome to New York, Newport. Not quite New York, is it? My name is Geraldine Places. My husband and I are owners of a farm. 2,440 feet of pipeline will come through that farm. Also, we have an access road that comes up through our farm, through the barnyard, up through the fields, and crosses an extensive watering system for our livestock. We're pretty concerned about that, especially after hearing the report that Ernest Casting did about karst in our area. We don't want any system coming over our property or through our community that's going to change that water system. What I want to know is how you mitigate the water being damaged. How does that happen? That's my only question.
Fairly broad question. If by that you mean the supply being damaged, you're going to have to find an alternate source.
17.
We can only approve the project if there is reasonable assurance that these things are protected.
My name is Russell Chisholm. I'm a Newport resident. I'm a United States Army veteran of Desert Storm. In my lifetime, I never imagined that I would be fighting for our nation's interests overseas, only to have to return home and fight for my community in this way. In light of the fact that the pipeline industry insiders were allowed to stack the hearing in Radford with hired commenters 3 hours before the published start of that hearing, thereby depriving people within the communities along the pipeline routes from the opportunity to speak to water quality issues, will you agree to additional hearings on groundwater and sedimentation impacts in Giles County or other locations on the MVP route?
As we stand right now, the only hearings that are available are the ones that have been scheduled.
My request is going to stand. If there's a question of resources or time, then how can the people of Giles County expect DEQ to monitor and correct construction damage when it happens?
As part of our, again, the plans get approved and the permit gets, or certificate gets issued, the agency is committed to making sure there are DEQ staff as well as DEQ contractors on site to make sure those plans that meet the requirements for addressing erosion control as well as stormwater quality and quantity are being met during the construction as well as post-construction.
Will you commit to giving serious consideration to job losses in agribusiness and tourism that will occur here in Virginia's mountain playground as a result of over-industrialization of local water resources?
What I'll commit to is that if the 401 certification is issued, there will be a reasonable assurance that water quality is not going to be affected.
401 permit.
We are informed by the fact that there have been problems in other areas, and that is in fact one of the reasons that we are planning to have on-site inspections throughout. There is no legal basis available to us to make a decision based on actions in other states.
If you sign off on a 401 certification without true public input, you are colluding with an industry that has proven it cannot self-regulate. You are
on Gladstone. The last major threat that this area faced when we had to fight like this was for a very large power line that was planned. Now, at least in that case, they went through the process of defining a need, and we were able to find a much less impacting solution because there was something on the table that needed to be a problem to be solved, and we found a better solution. So this is relevant here because in the case of the pipeline, the application of FERC has no actual statement of need, and FERC's FEIS has no statement of need. There's nothing that you can look at, see there's a problem, and see whether the solution fits the problem or whether it's a better solution. So why is this relevant? So my perception is that you're attempting to analyze this project in an unusually short period of time. And the question is why? And the only answer I've heard is because the company says they're in a hurry. So these companies always say that they're in a hurry. It's a bargaining position. And we know from the contracts that they give us that their bargaining positions always start off pretty much in their favor. And a lot of us realize that's not good, and we try and change that. So the point here is that there is literally no need to hurry, because there's no need and there's no statement of need. Your schedule plans to review this project in about half the typical time, but this is one of the most complex projects that you've ever been asked to study. So questions for you, 3 quick questions, and answer them as you please. So why is the study have such a short timeline and review process? I hope you can appreciate that this perception of a rush job does not inspire the confidence of the people here. Second, I understand from your earlier comments that you believe that the stream crossings and the erosion is to be regulated and mitigated, and that you plan to have inspections of the construction. But as a practical matter, what happens when the construction doesn't meet the requirements, and what actually will happen when the proposed mitigation doesn't work?
As far as the timeline, through our laws and regulations and the Administrative Process Act, we are admonished to make timely decisions. The timeline for this decision-making process is consistent or longer than most. We will not make any decisions without a thorough analysis of all the comments that we've got. So I'm not prepared to characterize it as a rush. What happens if there's failure to comply with the rules? There will be enforcement consequences, and mitigation can't fail. If we ever get to the point where we need mitigation, it won't be mitigated until the mitigation is successful.
All right, so my last comment sounds like we're being asked to take on faith that in the event we will do something about it. But due to the perception of a rush job, that leaves us without a lot of faith. Thank you.
Fully in karst. That's been my research all those years. There are 3 other of my colleagues that have, 2 of whom have almost as many years. We are the true karst specialists. And I want to comment on that just very briefly. MVP has hired Raper Aiden to do their karst work. They have what they call a karst specialist team. Yet there is no indication of who they are, what their credentials are, and specifically what projects they've worked on. I'm asking you, is that something you will try to find out once you get all of that information? Because it does make a difference on what they've done in their karst lives compared to what we have done.
Yes.
Okay? And then a second thing is we all know that karst is one of those sensitive areas. It's areally extensive. We don't just do linear studies. And then also, I've been involved in that course of 30 years here in this area, I've been involved with other projects. Some I've approved, as a consultant, some I have disapproved. But in every case, and they've all included karst, in every case, they have quarries, the power lines, application of sludge from industrial plants, lots of different things. Whenever there was a risk that could not be adequately studied, meaning that there weren't enough diatrace, and you can't do enough diatrace, or any other data, in every one of those cases where I was successful and the appropriate government entities said, no, we can't do this, in every one of those cases, they said, if there is risk that we cannot fully understand, we don't know what the consequences are going to be, even after, when something's done, it's too late, because then if you do have contamination or whatever it's doing. But in every case, the determination was basically this. We are going to err on the side of environmental integrity and water quality. If we don't know all of the data, we have to go with a no answer. It's sort of like a done fit, don't, no. But anyway, it sounds almost like that. But anyway, the point is, if the risk is not fully known, we have to, it's my opinion, professional opinion, we have to err on the side of public safety. I encourage you, and I know you'll get all the reports, and all the details are in there from all four of us who've done that. And thank you so much for coming. And good luck with everything that you are about to do.
Again, I want to thank the director for coming again. If you have
from FERC and MVP, your science is no good. So let's look at some of the water impacts of hybrid alternative 1A. It affects, based on current best available scientific information, it affects 68 fewer wells and springs within 150 feet of the construction right of way, 125 fewer wetlands crossed requiring mitigation. It avoids 3 rivers that have habitat for the Roanoke log perch and 11 tributaries that also have Roanoke log perch. 8 miles less of karst. 130 fewer karst features within 50 feet of construction right of way. All of these, would you consider these to be significant impacts? Let the record show the nod was yes.
I have not looked at hybrid 1A, and so I can't compare it to the others. Well,
we'll leave you with some reading material pursuant to your request, because what you see in the FERC's federal EIS is filled with information that is not the best scientifically available information. It also has some other additional impacts. If 52 miles more of co-location, federal agencies prefer co-location, paralleling an existing right-of-way, 45 fewer residences within 50 feet of the construction work area, 5 fewer rural and historic districts comprising 15 miles, which the State Historic Preservation Officer recently reported were going to be adversely and permanently affected by the pipeline. 4 fewer high consequence areas. You're in what's called a high consequence area. If it blows up, goodbye, we're all gone. There are 4 fewer. It avoids greenfield crossings, as Andrew Downs spoke of the Appalachian National Scenic Trail. It crosses it in existing 138 right-of-way, which is already disturbed. It avoids new greenfield crossings at 3.5 miles of the Forest Service on Peters Mountain, Brush Mountain, and Sinking Creek Mountain. It avoids 2.5 miles less of the U.S. Forest Service designated roadless area. It avoids adverse impacts on more than 15,000 acres of interior forest, core forest of which the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation has screamed bloody murder about in their most recent filing to the FERC, that they've totally misanalyzed this report, bad science. And avoids 8 Virginia designated conservation sites which are not identified or listed in the FEIS. What you have before you is bad science. I encourage you to deny the permit and require as a condition that they go back and reanalyze this alternative because of the significance of the impacts.
And I assume that FERC also has this assessment of hybrid alternative 1A?
They have the assessment.
And you'll leave it with us?
We will leave it with you. Thank you very much for your time.